Okay, let's talk about building vocabulary. From a very early age, like infancy, it's been shown that the more people talk to you and the more exposure you have to books and literature and people using a wide level of vocabulary, it has a huge impact on your reading comprehension and ability. The more vocabulary you have, the deeper and more widely varied the vocabulary you have, it makes it a lot easier for you to comprehend what you're reading, and it makes you just a much better reader, and it helps you to study. So we're going to talk briefly about building vocabulary. One thing you want to do is observe your words and habits. What words do you use over and over again? So if you read if you write something, you write a paper, read it out loud to yourself. Are you using the same words over and over again to describe something, or can you describe something a little bit more differently? There are word wheels out there, so things like emotions, if you just are constantly saying words like, happy, angry, sad, scared, you can use word wheels to be more specific about, well, what kind of angry, what kind of sad. There's a difference between some of these, levels of emotions. When it comes to, like they said this, they said, you'll want to, again, be more varied in that. So after you've done an initial walkthrough of something that you're writing, go through and see whether or not you're using the same types of words. See if you can vary it up a bit. When it comes to good, okay, good and nice. How are things? It's good. It was good. It was nice. It was so good and nice. So be sure that you're, again, varying that vocabulary. So word wheels would be a nice way to give you some ideas of other things that you could use when you're writing or when you're reading. It just makes it makes reading come to life. Okay, I'm going to backtrack a little bit. So again, so observing your words and your habits. What words are you currently using? And then being creative in using more expressive words. Get into that habit. You'll want to associate with articulate people. And I don't mean be a snob, okay? That's not what I mean. But for example, my husband, he was an English major, and he has always used, he read all the time. He grew up, there was nothing to do but read, so he read all the time, and he pulls no punches with his vocabulary, even around our kids. So I'll give you an example. When our oldest was a toddler and our youngest was a baby, they would sometimes get into it, and he would say, "Stop antagonizing your brother," whenever our oldest would mess with the baby. "Stop antagonizing your brother." And at one point, the baby cried, and our then 3-year-old held up his hands and said, "I'm not antagonizing him." Okay, we'll pick up vocabulary of the people that are around us. Another thing is, we were getting in the car and it was maybe 40 degrees. If you grew up in Houston, 40 degrees is cold. Anywhere else, that's a summer day. Okay, but we got in the car and it was about 40 degrees, and they were just like, it's freezing, oh my gosh, it's freezing. And my husband said, it is not freezing, it is well above 32 degrees. Don't engage in senseless hyperbole. And there was just silence from the back seat, and they said, okay. So eventually, then when we talked about hyperbole, they had a little bit of a background of what situation you might use this in. So let's see. So there's that. Look up words that you don't know. If you're reading something and you come across a word that you don't know, write it down. Okay, don't stop and look it up necessarily right then and there. But from context, you might get a general idea of what it is. But write it down and then come back to it later. So chances are it's similar to what you thought it was, but it might be something completely different. You also might hear what things actually sound like. A problem that my husband had is that he had only ever seen things that were written. He had never heard most of these words. So one time he used the word, he said epitome, and I said, what? And he was using the word epitome, and I said, you mean epitome? And he's like, that's how it's pronounced? So look up the words. Also look up how they're pronounced, so that if you ever say it out loud, you know what it's supposed to sound like. Write down new words as you come across them. And practice them mentally. So if you're not in the habit of using a particular vocabulary word, it can sound awkward the first time that you're using it. So practice mentally. Kind of have little conversations in your head about like, what would this sound like in a normal conversation so it doesn't sound awkward. And then you can practice it in conversation. And again, in the meantime, while you're reading, if you don't want to constantly stop and look things up, just jot it down and use contextual clues to kind of suss out what you think it might be. Okay, I'm going to go past the word wheels real quick here. And then just a few more tips on building vocabulary. Excuse me. Learn common word parts. This is especially handy if you are in a science class or in medicine. Learning those different word parts can help you kind of assess, what might this word mean if you're not entirely sure. Review great speeches, as if you have so much spare time. But if you get the chance, look at how people write. Look at how people speak, like the good speakers, the good writers. The more you get a sense for how they speak and how they write, it'll start to become more. It'll feel more natural for you to speak and write in a similar way. My parents never, I did not grow up, I didn't learn Spanish. They didn't speak to me in Spanish, so I grew up just speaking English. But they would speak Spanish around each other, primarily if they were trying to keep a secret from me. So I would hear them speak it to each other. I would hear them speak it to relatives, but they only ever spoke in English to me. But when it finally got to the point where I was taking Spanish in school, there were certain things that, I don't know, I would write a sentence and I wasn't quite sure what the rules were, but like certain ways of writing things just sounded right to me. And I couldn't tell you why it was right to say it this way versus that way. So I just went with the way that sounded right to me. And I was almost always correct with that. And it's not because I was a native Spanish speaker at all, but I had just had enough of an exposure to it to get a sense of those patterns. And so get a sense of those patterns in the things that you're reading. Invest in a vocabulary book. So not just a dictionary. So, this could be a dictionary, this could be a thesaurus. There are specific vocabulary books for specific topics. So, medical dictionaries and whatnot. See what's out there. And again, just read. The more exposure you have, the more natural it will feel to use particular words, to use more different and varied words. And it'll help you both in your reading comprehension and in your writing later on. Some specific circumstances. So, for example, reading in a second language. This is where vocabulary will especially be important. And so, in the beginning, in one of the videos that are embedded in this PowerPoint, he mentions you're not reading for gist, you're reading for in-depth knowledge. However, if this is not your first language, go ahead and get the gist of it first. If you are constantly stopping to look up vocabulary, that stop-start will kind of prevent you from getting deep down into it, and it'll be a little bit difficult to get the big picture. So just, go over it first, read the whole thing over first just to get the gist of it, just jotting down words that you don't know as you go along, and then look up those words, and then you can go back through it. So that way you get kind of a big picture feel, and then you can go through and get the detail. Feel free to discuss it in your first language. If you have a friend or someone you know in the same class, there is absolutely no rule that you have to discuss material in a particular language. Concepts are concepts everywhere. So discuss it in your first language and hash it out that way. And vary your reading materials. So, when you're watching something, put on the subtitles and, have the subtitles on. If you are, reading something, read books, read fiction, read nonfiction, pick up a magazine, all these different things. So just vary those reading materials. That'll help with vocabulary as well. Some other special circumstances. This is not specific to vocabulary, but just the times that we are in. If you are trying to read with children around, you know how difficult that can be. Okay, they're constantly up in your space. So just a few things that you might try. One is read in short segments. You never get long periods of time, so set a timer for 10 or 15 minutes. See if there's something that you can distract them with for that time, and then just disappear for 10 or 15 minutes at a time. So don't be like, oh, don't be overwhelmed with, oh, I have to get all this reading done. I don't have, 3 hours of uninterrupted time. Okay, but find 10 or 15 minutes here and there. In the long run, it'll add up. So maybe you can't read a whole chapter, but maybe a section. Read while they sleep. Ha 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 ha. If they're babies, I'm so sorry. But when they finally go to sleep, use that time, okay? So resist the urge to do like dishes and cleaning and stuff after they've gone to sleep. This is one of the few times that you can get some quiet, uninterrupted, time to concentrate and read. So do that. It's okay if things are a little bit dirty, especially this year and semester. Take reading with you, okay? So like if you take them to the playground, or if they have an after-school activity or something like that, take reading with you, and that way you can just kind of do that. So if you're in the pickup line for school, and you're waiting for them, I do this, okay? So you have your reading with you, and you get there nice and early so that you're at the beginning of the line, but you have your reading. And so I'll spend an hour in the carpool pickup line doing my reading. Or you can have an article or something with you on the playground. They're like, look at me, Mom, and you're like, that's great, honey, as you're highlighting. You're not a bad parent, you're an excellent parent, okay? Do what you need to do. And this one would be more appropriate for older kids, but have maybe a family reading time, okay, where maybe you guys read something together, but then it's like, okay, drop everything and read individually. This really just depends on the maturity level of your kids. So you might have kids that this works for approximately 30 seconds, and then they're talking again. So if that's the case, wait until they're asleep. And then reading for different courses. So when it comes to different courses, you're going to be reading for different purposes and trying to look for different things. So for a literature class, they're going to want to know about key characters. They're going to want to know about their actions. What is the author's intent? So focus on those sorts of things. For history, use an outline. Something that has always frustrated me about making timelines is that you'll put stuff on a timeline and then you immediately run out of space, where you think you'll have plenty of space, but then you're trying to cram all this stuff together. If you go to this link, you can create this online interactive timeline that once you're finished making it and editing it, you can scoot things around and add things. And then when it's all said and done, you can save it as a PDF and send it to yourself. So that can be something that you can use. So, connect past events and people. This led to this, led to this, led to that. Compare past events and current events. What are some similarities and differences? When it comes to math, seriously, work out all the problems. I got a very good basis in statistics because we had a professor that we were using his textbook, like he had created it, and it was a first edition. So if we were the first person to find an error in it, he would give us $2.50, which at the time just happened to be exactly how much a frozen pizza cost. And so I, being a hungry college student, worked out every problem in this book all the time, and inevitably I would find a problem. I would find an error. I would send it to him. I get $2.50, and that's how I ate on Saturdays. So do those. And happy accident of that is that ignore my dog whining. Is that I got a really good foundation in statistics. For psychology, focus on theories and arguments. Find real-world examples. And then for anthropology, mind maps. We'll talk about mind maps when we get into taking notes. All right, so we've got that. These are some different circumstances. Next, we will talk about highlighting, and then I'll discuss some different tried and true methods of taking notes.